Good afternoon. Welcome to the afternoon session on the second day of Vasant Vihar Lit Festival. The first half, we got to hear from different authors about their views, um, their points of view, uh, very divergent, but it was good to hear them. We also found out about Sundar Nursery, and if you haven't been there, it's a place surely worth visiting. It's green and it's beautiful, and the pictures said so. And now that you know a little bit more, you can go and look for those monuments within the nursery. Um, Away is in some way a continuation of the session we had earlier, which was on travel and hospitality. Um, it's about going away, and like in the session earlier, it was mentioned that we all need to get out and we want to get out, and we have to explore ways of getting out. Dhruv Bokra here is going to give us pointers on how we can do that. Um, Dhruv is an adventure cyclist and an author. The English biker inspired him to ride across remote and distant lands. His book, Grit, Gravel, and Gear, is about his solo Pan American journey. Away is about traveling to and getting away from oneself. And it was written during the lockdown, as Dhruv was just telling us. So, Away inspires us to discover raw freedom in the mountains, in the valleys, and in the great outdoor. In conversation with him is Dr. Gautam Vora. So, Dhruv, welcome to Vasant Vihar Lit Festival.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Dr. Vora, welcome to you as well. Over to you. Let's hear what you have to tell us about Away and how we can take those short trips and rediscover the mountains.
Okay. So let me just give you a context to this book. I started cycling, adventure cycling, about 8 years ago, and it started with a very small tour in the Kangra region. It was my first ever bike ride after I bought a bicycle with a group of cyclists who were attempting to tour the Kangra region over 3-4 days. And it was an arduous trip for me at that time because it was almost 280 kilometers over 3 days. I had never done more than 20-30 kilometers on the roads in Mumbai, where I was currently staying at that time. So this was a remarkable trip. It opened my eyes to the outside world on a bicycle, and to roads in the interiors, which are so pretty, and also away in another time altogether. And I saw things on a bicycle in the mountains that I had never seen before. Beautiful snow-capped mountains, and stopping by monasteries and different types of cultural places. And of course, experiencing different types of food. And this trip was in the peak of winter. In fact, it was at this point itself, I think it was January 27th, and extremely cold. As you know, the icy winds of the Dholadhar come down the valley. And I kind of broke my pedals in the mountains on this trip. This was followed by a lot of extensive trips that I made in and around Mumbai, where I was based at that time, in the Western Ghats. I discovered many pretty places, including a place called Shilim. This is the road going to Shilim in the Western Ghats. Really, it's the colors, the rain, the mist. It is really a surreal place. And I really sort of honed my cycling skills on trails and small roads, and huge climbs in the Western Ghats. And in my book, I touch upon all these places in my first chapter, which is Two Lives. And why I called it Two Lives is because I had a very busy retail and sales job. I was managing a large team of 3,000 people, and I had a arduous traveling schedule of 10 to 15 days a month. And then yet I had to take time out to train and cycle and go on these trips on Sundays, come back exhausted, and go back to work on Monday. But it was extremely enthralling and very, very mesmerizing to be in these kind of places. And I think honed my brain, my mind, and made me a much more positive person. Alongside, obviously, we would keep taking trips to Kamau. So it was Rani Khet, trips to Sitla Khet, and a couple of other places which I attempted to go to, including some temples in Katramal, which is the only other shrine devoted to the sun god in India. And of course, on these trips, I come across many places, all types of flora and fauna, which I have captured in the book. My main, I think, the stellar expedition, which actually changed my life forever, was the Manali to Khardungla expedition. This is 2012, I'm talking about 8 years ago, when not many people attempted this particular route from Manali to Khardungla, over 550 kilometers at an average altitude of 14,000 feet. And there are four big passes on the way, all above 15, 16,000 feet. In fact, my first major pass ever in my life was Baralachala at 16,000 feet. And the elation that we felt on crossing this pass, with just 9 months of training was just amazing. But this expedition really proved to me that, the impossible is possible. I was in my late 40s, mid 40s by then. And the fact that I could get to an altitude of 17,000 feet and 18,000 feet was a barrier that I had to break in my mind. And cycling at that altitude for 6, 7 hours a day was something of a mind changer and a mind shifter as well. This is where I fell in love with photographing mountains and landscapes, and I discovered something in myself which I never knew that I had, which was to be able to compose a photograph or look for lighting and things like that. I'm still very raw compared to a lot of photographers, but I discovered that I delighted in taking pictures of landscapes. As a result of which, I ended up being the last one to reach camp every night, but I was busy taking pictures and stopping and doing that. Of course, the Manali Khardungla route was very intense, a lot of hard climbing. I think it was the very first time that I started talking to the wind and the mountains. So it does something to your brain. You start hallucinating a bit at that altitude. You're oxygen deprived, but it also expands the brain and makes you look at life differently, spiritually. And this, of course, I've captured in my book as well. It's a major story in the book. And then that emboldened me to take on more difficult expeditions. But this time, I was not that well prepared either. But I said, no, let's go for it. This was a very ambitious riding from Gangtok to Lake Gurudongmor, which is one of the highest lakes in the world, and the second highest lake in India at about 17,000 feet. This was meant to be a 4-day expedition, and I was actually down with fever just before it. But I still managed to complete most of it, but I had to break off at Lachen due to an emergency in the family and fly back to Delhi. That's why this book, in the book, the title is A Lake Too Far. But it was a lake that I missed, and I intend to go back and do it. But yes, it taught me the value of perseverance, planning, and also training, how important it is, and you can't let one success make you become complacent. But it was a beautiful trip, and it showed up a part of the Northeast that I had not experienced before. After this, I took some more unusual treks and trips. I was in Alaska for about 10, 15 days, and I took a fabulous trip in the Arctic in alpine conditions. But of course, the altitudes in the North Pole side are very less, but the conditions are just like Ladakh. And trekked over frozen lakes, and this trek was different. In India we used to trekking with porters and carrying a light backpack, whereas in European and US markets you actually have to carry everything on yourself. So I had about 30 kilos of gear on my back, which I was not used to, but it was a technical alpine climb, and again it broke a lot of barriers in my mind. Very interesting stories to be told from this part of the world, and I learned a lot of survival skills, how to project and protect yourself from bears, and how to light fires. I kind of picked up a lot on these two trips in Alaska. Of course, subsequently in this trip itself, I ran solo on a cycling trip on the Seaward Highway for about 200 kilometers. And more than the journey, I think the distance, it was what I experienced on the road, the kindness, the little adventures I had on the way, which I've tried to sort of showcase um, in this book. And interestingly, actually, this book is like a prequel and a sequel to Grit, Gravel, and Gear. So up till now, it was all about how I got introduced to the world of cycling and high altitude mountaineering, and how it prepared me for something, a mega project in my mind, which was for 1.5 years. And of course, the subsequent stories in the book are about how when I came back, I imbibed the learnings from that trip, the big Pan American trip, into my expeditions in the Himalayas. So like I said, in 16, 17, after this Alaska trip, I really wanted to go back, and I undertook a 400-day, 15,000-kilometer journey from the Arctic to the Andes. So this is just like a break. This is not in the book. There's a different book by the name of Grit, Gravel, and Gear. Here, of course, I cycled from the Arctic to the Andes and had numerous experiences, which were absolutely amazing. And I penned it all down in a 387-page book, which has been on the top 100 list of CrossFit bookstores in 2019, and perhaps the only book on bicycle touring from India. Subsequently, after coming back, of course, I took up bike touring with a vengeance, because I was really missing my trips in the Americas and North and South America. But I changed my gears. As you can see, technically, I took on a different setup. I learned a lot of things when I was there, and this is called a bike packing setup. If you can see the way the bags are loaded on the bicycle, it's self-contained. I can be on the road. Other than a tent, it's got my food, it's got my jacket, and everything that I need to be on the road, solo and unsupported for 3-4 days. So this is called a bike packing setup. So I did many trips, like the Narkanda to Loro trip to Chanchal Pass. Uh, Again, on roads that I'd never been on before, trails that many people don't go on. If they're not from the region, these are small roads between villages, which people who travel to these parts of the country never see, because they're usually in cars, and these more roads are a bit risky and closed at some parts of the year. This is, of course, the Pabbar River near Rodu. It's a beautiful valley deep in the mountains, just at the base of Chanchal Pass, which is at 13,000 feet, and this is at about 5,500 feet. Then after that, I undertook various small bikepacking trips from work, over 2-3 days, similar to Karapathar, Kothkai. All these are captured with interesting stories that I encountered on the way. And of course, to top it off, the last big trip that I made was in November 2019, when I went on the old Hindustan Tibet road, which is one of the toughest roads, again in India, to not just drive on, but even cycle on. It was from Narkanda to Chitkul, over 250 kilometers, and an altitude gain of almost 25,000 feet over 4 days. Extremely tough climbing and tough road, but absolutely craggy, raw, and really, really beautiful. Again, I had the opportunity to really be in a beautiful part of the world and take some amazing photographs and see things that I had never seen before. This Chitkul is often called the last Indian village in Kinnaur district, and so it is. It's just about 80 kilometers from the Indo-China border. At this point, the road just ends, and I had obviously an opportunity to be there in November, which was late fall, but brilliant colors, and this is really a very memorable trip that I made. The book Away is available on Amazon as a paperback, and as well as a downloadable version on Kindle. Thank you.
Well, Dhruv, that's very exciting. And, this is your second book that the Vasant Vihar Club is doing on you. And we are delighted to have you back again.
Thank you, Bharat.
How did you get into, there are many people seeking adventure, but very few seek it on a cycle. And I don't think there's a tradition in India to take up cycling and part of adventure tourism. I think there is in Europe. So tell us how you got into it and have done such remarkable journeys.
Well, actually, it's an interesting story which I tell in the first page of my book, which I will not reveal. I think
in the second, your second book, that's
second book. Yes. So I reveal how I got into cycling on my. I mean, it was quite extraordinary. I went in to buy a motorcycle and I came out with a bicycle. So, but yes, I think it's something magical. It's something that I was meant to do, perhaps, and I stumbled upon it. I was luckily in a part of the country like the Mumbai at that time when I took up cycling seriously in 2012. where the Western Ghats were very close proximity, and you could just take a 2-hour drive out of 1.5-hour drive out of Mumbai, and you could be in Lonavala. And then you've got these picturesque, beautiful roads, uh, you know, practically hardly any traffic, and you can just escape and get away and really spend the whole day cycling and come back and be back home by the evening. So yes, those opportunities were there. But yes, cycling has picked up a lot, Mr. Vora, in the last 1 year, primarily because the gyms were closed and people did not have any other avenue for fitness.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people who join cycling may go back to the gyms, but many will stick on because they've discovered the joy of cycling. And cycling by itself is a progressive sport, and you start falling in love with it as you keep doing more and more of it. There are hundreds of cycling groups around the country now. And over the last 8 years, from the time I sort of started cycling, I've seen a remarkable shift, a pivotal shift in the way the number of riders who are out there, very accomplished ones, riding thousands of kilometers. Just the other day, the Delhi Cyclist took its annual event, which is Delhi to Mumbai in 7 days. And many girls went on it and they completed 1,500 kilometers in 7 days. So yes, cycling has come up in a very big way. But
Good to
what is
hear.
not big is the adventure cycling in the Himalayas. So I've done over 2,500 kilometers of cycling on Himalayan roads.
My God.
But many people don't like to do that because it means taking time away from family for extended tours and trips. Plus, it's that much harder. You need to train for it. It's
So,
very
so
difficult.
would you say that in the Himalayas, the trip you took, I want to compare it with your earlier trip in the, from the Arctic to Latin America. Would you
Yes.
say Himalayan mountain biking experience was
Yes.
a tougher deal?
Yes. I mean, both are tough for various reasons.
Yeah.
Both are tough for various reasons, and it was very difficult to sort of navigate. That actually.
Yeah,
I
so
seem to have lost you
I
just a
want to
second.
draw attention to your Manali Khardungla thing. You
Yes.
you mentioned that now nowhere had the landscape been so barren and stony in your
Yes.
Manali Khardungla and stony as it was on the road to Khardungla.
Yes.
You're talking about the last stretch, the highest motorable pass. Now, did you find this true of much of the Himalayas or only of this?
Much of the Himalayas is like that. Much of the Himalayas is like that.
Yeah,
It's very tough. The Chitkul, for example, this particular journey from Narkanda to Chitkul was as tough as the Manali one
right,
in many ways. It was just 4 days. Manali was 10 days.
right.
But yes, I would qualify Manali as the toughest. My trip in the Andes was tougher than the Manali Khardungla trip
Really?
because Manali Khardungla I was without any gear. I mean, there was a vehicle carrying all our gear for the day and stuff like that. I had to just ride my bicycle up. But in the Andean trip, I was on my own. I was carrying 40 kilos of gear up to 16,000 feet, 15,000 feet. So that makes a tremendous difference, to the whole trip and the ease of that trip. So
And does it matter that you are in the Himalayas, you're amongst your own people, and in the Andes and Arctic down south, it is a different world and different set of people, or it doesn't?
no, it is different. I mean, psychologically, when you are in your own country, you feel safer
Yes.
because you know the terrain, you know the language. And also in India, we have a remarkable infrastructure with respect to mobile networks.
Yes.
So you can communicate if you're in trouble. But in the Andes, there is no network at all in many sections, huge sections. I mean, you're cut off totally from the world.
Right.
And while the people are very friendly, they're very forthcoming, and you can never go hungry because someone or the other will invite you home if you're in a deep problem. But there is a psychological safety net that you have when you're in your own country for sure, and especially when the mobile network is so strong.
Yeah.
If you fall off the ravine or you have a major breakdown, you can call for help. But in a foreign country, there is no such thing as
Right.
help, especially in a remote part of the country world.
I mean, you had several trips. I want to take on, apart from Khardungla, the one to Sikkim. And
Yes.
here you make an interesting observation. I found Sikkim a very beautiful part of the world.
Yes.
There you mentioned that you got involved a bit into the Buddhist culture and you began to think in those lines. Can you discuss that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of got closer to the Buddhist culture on my Manali Khardungla trip itself.
Yes.
I had a lot of spiritual experiences there, and from there on, I started taking more interest in Buddhism as a state of prayer. And I consider myself a man of all religions, so frankly, I pray to all gods. But yes, Buddhism is special in many ways because I find a lot of solace and comfort and strength from some of its ideals.
Right. You know, as a biker, you were comparing yourself to this pole dance biking experience, and you said you are relatively cautious. And some of these other guys are absolutely rip raring to go and got into a lot of accidents.
Yes,
And,
yes, yes.
and what struck me is that you said that while going down a particular slope, personally attained 40 km per hour.
Yes, yes. Sometimes I've
My
attained
God,
60
that's a lot
kilometers an
lot
hour
of
in the
speed.
Andes.
That's a lot of speed. And
Yeah.
luckily, you managed to avoid accidents, unlike many of these other fellows.
Yeah, I mean, they do a lot of rough riding over the weekends, over trails. They go down small single track rocky trails at 30, 40 kilometers an hour. So
Yeah,
their sport is different, you know. It's really hardcore mountain biking.
right.
Whereas mine is more touring.
Yes.
And yes, even on a loaded bike,
Yeah,
even on the Manali Kudungla trip, there was one stretch after Nakila Pass
right.
where we got to, I think, 56 kilometers an hour on that road.
Right.
So it was really quite incredible. And you can lose your life if you just
Yes,
misjudge
I
one
would
little
have
turn.
thought so. How would you contrast that trip to the Narkanda Chanchal Pass trip?
That was extremely tough. I mean, it
Ah,
was a 8,000 feet climb, and it was about the evening when I reached La Rote, which was the last village
right.
before the last stretch to the pass. And it was extremely tough. The gradient was almost like 20 degrees, 18 degrees, a rocky gradient at that. So I was pushing up my bike for quite a few kilometers because the wheels were just not getting traction on the mud. It had rained very heavily that year, actually.
Right.
So the road was washed up. There is no road. It was opened up. The pass opened up to traffic just 2 years ago, and only one bus goes on during the whole day to the other side. But is largely being used only by herders and by nomads. And so therefore, it's not really a road. It's just a wide trail, actually.
Yeah.
But tough. That was a tough trip. It was a
Tough
very
trip,
steep
yeah.
gradient,
Right.
very steep gradient, actually.
Right. No, you talk about fair amount of climbing even in places like Mexico, Guatemala, and Peru. How would you contrast this compared to the Himalayas with one specific distinction? I know the higher you go, air gets thinner, the breathing is an issue. How do you compare this with your Mexico, Guatemala experiment and adventure to this Himalayas? How would you contrast it?
It's the same. They have high mountains like us.
Yeah.
I have been up to about 10,000 feet in Mexico
Okay.
with my gear, by which time I had already done 10,000 kilometers, I think. So I was very conditioned. So I had no breathing problem.
Okay.
It was just the weight of the gear that I was carrying, which is 35, 40 kilos. But I would say the mountains are very similar. The terrain is similar. The same conifer, poplar, deodar, just with a small difference that in North America you have more cedar trees.
Yeah.
But the terrain is generally same. Mexico is a bit more drier, but generally speaking, the terrain is the same in Peru as well. On the other side of the mountains, you could just like the picture that you see behind me could be a scene straight out of Peru. I mean, there is
Okay.
absolutely no difference,
Right.
except that Peru is a very high mountains as well, 14,000, 16, 17,000 feet.
Right.
And of course, they have a very one of the seven summits of the world is in Peru. It's a 8,000 meter plus peak.
Right. You know, of course, while you are in all these areas, you talk about various rivers, and you talk about the river Pabbar, which is a tributary of the Tons River. And since I grew up in, my schooling in Dehradun, Tons is one of major part of our lives. But now the Tons, like so many other rivers in the Himalayas, are all drying up.
Yes.
They are drying up, and as we earlier on talked about, the population pressure, the demand on the resources, and you have mentioned your involvement with the environment and the communities, the often tribal, remote communities in the area. What is your reaction to both the environmental degradation and the consciousness amongst these people in trying to protect their environment?
They are extremely worried. I mean, they are devastated by the changes that are happening, whether it is to the apple crops or the climate change that is happening is changing the patterns of weather. You may have noticed there was a news about the entire mountain on top of Kulu in flames just the other
Right,
day.
right,
That was one of the biggest fires that India has ever seen.
right.
So close to huge populated place, and of course this is a massive problem across the world, not just in India, but we are going to suffer the most because we have a massive population. We are in just below the air conditioner of the world, which is the Himalayas,
Right.
and it's melting very fast. And once the melting starts, it's not going to stop, and whole valleys are going to get wiped out. But more than that, which is still beyond the control of most human beings from a policy level, I think what we were discussing earlier is that responsible tourism is the need of the hour. People who travel to the mountains should carry their garbage back with them. They
Waste
should
management.
carry everything. There should be punishment for sure. The government needs to really clamp down hard, including on its own government officers who are polluting the rivers. I have enough pictures to prove how municipal trucks are polluting rivers in Himachal, in Uttarakhand, in every single town that I have traveled on. It is absolutely terrible. And you see dustbins everywhere, very nicely put. The
Yeah.
projects have been invested in for sure with good intention, but even the locals are not following them. It is very, very
You
sad.
know, you mentioned pictures, and I noticed in this way you have quite a few pictures. Unlike your previous book, you didn't have photographs. Or is
I
it
had.
because your photography has improved?
No, I have lots of pictures. In fact, I have more pictures in that one than
Maybe I've
this one.
forgotten that book. I remember
Yeah,
going with it very. Now,
yeah.
I wanted to understand how come in this Himalayan book, which is absolutely fascinating, you included a chapter on Alaska, because Alaska is
Yes.
in the other one as well, isn't it?
Yes.
हाँ,
So
तो
this
इसमें
book is
कैसे
more
लिया है?
like this book is like a prequel and a sequel to the
Okay,
Great Dragon Gear.
okay,
So I wanted to put Alaska in because it is providing a context
yeah,
to that journey, right?
okay,
It was a pivotal time in my life. So
yeah. There were 4 or 5 trips, and I'm going to touch upon the last trip, the Hindustan Tibet Road, classified in the History Channel as one of the deadliest roads in the world, built by Lord Dalhousie in 1850s.
yes.
Tell us a bit about that. That seems to be a very exciting one.
Yes, I mean, this road technically actually starts from the plains and
Okay.
then it is classified as the old Inson Tibet Road.
Yeah.
But what really changes dramatically is the geography of the road after Jispa, and the geography of the terrain, it suddenly becomes a narrow gorge. And it is really remarkable how they built this road. Apparently, they used thousands of Nepalese workers who perished while building this road.
Yeah.
And on many sections, there are shrines devoted to them, and very interesting history behind it. This road is very narrow. It's got deep gorges, and it's a technical marvel. It's an engineering marvel how they were able to cut through the mountain and build this particular road. There are barriers in quite a few sections to prevent vehicles from going off, but many sections there are none. And if you lose control of your vehicle, you will go 2,000-3,000 feet down the gorge.
Right,
It's
right.
really deep.
So, yeah,
And also it's prone to erratic weather.
Yeah.
So winds and rain and even sometimes snow, heavy snow in the sudden early snow flurries
Yeah.
in the winter, so which makes it unpredictable. The road from to Sangla, the last 10 kilometers, is extremely tough. It's got a very steep gradient of 16 to 18%. Normal gradient, Mr. Vora, is about 4 to 5% for vehicles, 3 to 4, so that army troops and vehicles can go.
yeah.
But moment the road goes above 7 to 10%, it is extremely tough. Even a vehicle goes only on first gear.
No, I think
all the way up.
all of us who've traveled in the hills have seen how
Yeah.
2 buses crossing over, one wheel is almost off. I think you
Yes,
mentioned it
it's
somewhere.
scary, absolutely.
And
It's a
at
narrow
the
road.
same
So,
time, you talk about the Kinnaur district's beauty flanked by Zanskar, Himalayan range, and the Dhauladhar.
Yes.
Yet you were in part of one of the most beautiful parts of the world.
Yes.
And yet there is a cruelty of a kind that, to give you your example, which still shocks all of us. You talk about how a painful experience with the cow that gave birth and
Yes.
went down, and you went dashing down to get the doctor, veterinarian, and they couldn't care a damn about what you did.
Absolutely.
The cow died. Luckily, the baby survived. Yeah, हमारे में क्या है यार? When this kind of thing happens, we are yet a cow-loving, animal-loving, very humane society in some ways, and yet this is the kind of thing we do.
I actually called someone through a friend, cyclist friend in Simla, who knows somebody in the government there, and it is his phone call through his offices that got the veterinarian up an hour later. I got to know. The shepherd called me and said that, the guy's come, but the cow's already passed away. But it was shocking. I mean, to see that just 100 meters away, 200 meters away was this really large veterinary hospital with a government doctor there.
Look at that. It doesn't make sense.
I'm sorry to be interrupting, but we are running out of time.
Well, I'll just...
Dhruv, there were two questions which I really want you to answer very quickly, if I may. Congratulations, sir. Very humbling. May I ask, on several day trips, how did you eat and sleep in order to endure the days? So very quickly, if you can tell us how you do that.
So if you're going through the mountains on a bicycle, or even if you're in a car, I mean, luckily for the Himalayas, you can stay in homestays. You don't have to camp if you're not ready for it. I would always carry peanut butter, almonds, bread, chocolates, that kind of comfort food which you can eat on the way, and you can cook up a quick lunch for yourself from that. Is good energy for you if you're cycling in the mountains. And then, of course, the evening meal you can plan your day in such a way that you always stop at a village or a small town, which will definitely have.
So you need some planning. You need to plan your trips. A lot of planning is involved.
Otherwise, you can get caught up in bad weather and really have a terrible time and say, I'll never do this again.
Right. And the second question is, what essential bike accessories and food stuff you recommend for adventurous cyclists like you?
I think travel very light. That's the first most important lesson that I learned after many mistakes that I made. Travel very light. Don't think about having baths. So don't carry too many changes of clothes. 2 changes, that's enough for a multi-day trip. Buy the equipment well, know the weather. And also just wear padded shorts and get the right jerseys, your right tops and jacket.
Okay.
And always wear a helmet in the Himalayas, because there are a lot of rash drivers out there and you can have an accident if you're not careful.
Okay. There are more questions which are coming in, but we are completely out of time. But thank you for the visual treat. It was like a breath of fresh air sitting here. And we do hope that, things slowly go back to normal, and then we will have an opportunity to visit these wonderful destinations.
Okay, thank you.
And do let us know if you want to start a cycling group in Vasant Vihar.
Sure, absolutely. I'd be delighted.
Thank you, Dr. Vora. A pleasure.
Thank you. Enjoyable
let me introduce my colleague, very senior, Mr. Ahluwalia, or should I say young at heart, Mr. Ahluwalia?
Absolutely.
He'll just say a few words.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Dhruv. It's amazing. To us, it looks like a story. We can't even imagine and one of us doing like that. I would love to do it.
That's why I said young at heart.
Yeah, but hearing you is enough, and it really is very, very nice. Thank you very much. God bless you. Very nice time. And thank you, Gautam, too. And of course, we have a very small memento, which will be sent to you at your home shortly.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And all the best. God bless you.
Thank you very much.